Welcome back. That was a really interesting panel discussion, just tackling some of the bigger topics in a broader sense, because there were so many different crossovers between the two, what could be separate subjects. You're looking at retention, you're looking at employment growth. We're also looking at fostering a sense of work culture, particularly given a global remote working environment. So now it's time to kind of split those out. We have got Brian and Jess kind of tackling the first issue, which is a really big one. It is the issue or the Whoa. Sorry, my bad. Let me turn off that incredible timer that you just heard in the background there. The incredible issue, the subject of retention, the subject of employment growth is what we're really going after. And I'm going to unpin myself and hand it over to both of you. This time is all yours. In terms of navigation of the NOBI session, let me just remind us how to go about doing that. So we are in session. Can someone tell me what session we're in? So session number 3, guys. Awesome. So session number 3 is what you're looking for. I'm going to let one of you guys share your screen, hand it over to you, and it's all yours.
You're up. All right. So I will be kicking us off. Brian and I are going to both be speaking on this topic, and we want to hear from you to get us started. So as we're thinking about our discussion focusing on strategies to retain and develop our existing employees, we have to kind of step back and think about, well, why are people leaving? Why are they not staying with us? And so we have our first activity on NOBI is going to be for you to share your thoughts. I'm going to bring up the group board as well. So in this first activity, it says share your thoughts. What are some reasons that you think employees are leaving their current role? So maybe what are you seeing at your organization, or what are some statistics you're hearing across different global organizations as well?
And maybe if I could jump in there for a second, feel free to share on the group board if that's easy and accessible for you right now. But also feel free to unmute and share your ideas with Jess, because it's something that she can type into the box in front of her as well.
So is anybody willing to unmute and give us their thoughts while we're typing?
Yeah, so I'm seeing on the board, they don't feel challenged.
Okay.
Yeah. Not feeling challenged. Job description is totally not what they're actually doing. Yeah, I heard somebody come off mute. So what else did we hear?
As we adapted in different situations, particularly during the pandemic, their roles ceased to be, we tried to focus not on just preserving the organization, but adapting to meet the needs of of our mission, what we're trying to do. And their particular roles and jobs where we used to put on big conferences, the people who were involved in that, those roles ceased to exist.
Okay.
Thank you. And let's see. Challenge.
Feeling stuck, what they're doing, overworked, resources. Yeah, these are challenges. Even seeing another one, it's maybe not a good fit, not a good company fit, or aging out and cannot keep up with the changes. So what can we do about all of this? So Brian and I are going to give some strategies to tackle some of those challenges. What can you do with your organization to have ongoing initiatives to meet employees where they are and overcome some of these challenges that you're seeing of people leaving and hopefully increasing your retention? So I'll go back to our session.
And Jess, we've kind of already introduced ourselves, so can we get right to the stats?
Yes, we can. Let's dive right in. Okay, so on the screen here, I have some employee retention statistics here that 75% of employees are experiencing some kind of burnout. And then across industries, this is a broad statistic here, but 4.1 years is the average tenure of employees staying with their organization. And that's an important stat just to hang on to. We're going to come back to that in here in a second. And then employees who don't feel valued, they are 34% more likely to leave their job within the next year. So we're seeing some importance here that we're seeing burnout. People are not feeling valued and they're not staying very long. So what can we do here?
And I think the 34%, goes to what Roy was saying is there's been this big shift that's been happening in positions, right? It's a very different environment. And so if you're not feeling like you're fitting in with that job, and I'm, so many of the studies I see are what I really want at work is to be appreciated. I'm doing good work and I'm adding value. And if there's a little off of, shift, that can make a huge difference. Real quickly, I just am going to throw in that 75% of experienced burnout. We've really seen a lot more of this after the pandemic. And a lot of the studies are really talking about mental health and mental wellness that you're seeing. Again, that isolation, some of the things we've been talking about lately with the remote. And so I think all these play into it.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely play into that. And we also can see when we're looking at that tenure, that estimated average employee retention. So as we see folks stay with their organization, there's a steady decrease in them actually leaving. So increased retention here as they stay longer, they're going to continue to stay with us, and as tenure increases, retention is likely to decrease there. So it's important to think of that, of where do we want to target our efforts? Is it just with that first year person, or do we lose interest as they've been with us for a longer period of time?
And I kind of have a spontaneous question, because when we were putting this together, Jess found this stat and showed me the graph, and it really made me start questioning and looking at my practices. And I have to tell you, I think that I probably did start to fall off, saying, oh, somebody's been with us for a long time, they're just going to stay, and maybe got too casual. Is this an anomaly? Am I an anomaly? Or how do you feel? Have you had the same kind of thing, or where do you focus on that retention?
Yeah. So Brian, is that a question for
Yes,
for our
yeah.
audience?
Yes. I always forget that I'm a panelist and I have all these questions because I want to learn. So I'm kind of throwing it out there. I thought Jess brought up a really great slide here. And so often we're thinking of onboarding in that first part, but we really do have to think across the whole spectrum of our employees. And so I'm wondering how you do it and what you think about when you're actually looking at retention.
So feel free to come off mute. Just to have this, we want to have this free-flowing, ongoing conversation with you all to hear about your experience as well. So what are we
And if
seeing?
nobody comes off mute, I'm going to do something that I've always wanted to do. I'm going to call on Nicola to answer with her organizations of how she thinks about it and where they've really put emphasis on retention. I think, like I said, for me, I have to admit, I've kind of been on that up front, really working, and maybe have overlooked some of our longer term employees. So I don't know if you have a comment, or if somebody else can come off mute and save Nicola from having to answer.
So cheeky. I actually did hear somebody wanting to jump in there, so I'm going to make space.
Okay.
Well, I really love your question, and this graph challenges what we do, because we put so much effort into that first onboarding, really making them feel a part. And I thought, are we doing that too? Are we neglecting people once they get to that 4 or 5 years where they're not valued? And I think one of the things that we do is we really focus on multiplication, where we have people who are engaged, they're helping the new people on board. And in a sense, having someone who's been a part have that fun of bringing someone in, that fresh, the excitement of, oh, this is so cool what we get to do, what we're learning. And I'm thinking maybe that's what really helps our retention, is we have people who are always on that front line of helping others and opening their eyes to, this is really a great thing. Again, with a nonprofit, we've got a mission, a cause that people rally around. But I think that's what helps, is they're involved in bringing the others along. So that's one way to address it.
I love
Yeah.
it. That's fantastic. I love the multiplication. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that too. And I'll even from an MCD perspective, when we are developing training, we know that our employees are experts in their fields. We have top performers throughout the organization that from an L&D perspective, we call on to develop our training. And we use their institutional knowledge. We have the MCD best known way, and we use their knowledge, their institutional specific MCD experienced in order to build training. And that helps them feel valued when they're called on by our leadership to say, hey, we want to know what you're doing. So just like Joy was saying, how can we multiply that? And continue to have growth within the organization. When we look at that 4 or 5 year mark, that gives them that feeling of being valued and that their work matters. Okay, so Brian, let's keep moving a bit into our next poll. So we want to hear from you personally of what is your number one motivator to keep you in your current role?
That's a good question.
So personally, I love learning and growing, being an educator, that lifelong learner. So for me, I'm going to answer the opportunities to grow so then we can start seeing, oh, look at that.
Look at that. Wow.
Wow.
So this is a bunch of educators on here. That's what I'm seeing.
And it also goes to show that statistic that I shared earlier, that we're seeing the shift away from compensation being the number one. This was exactly what those stats were showing, is that opportunity to grow is actually coming up to that number one spot.
Yeah, and we're noticing that too. And that's a little plug for Nobi. That's one of the things about this micro learning and the platform is we're so small, we can specialize those growths very quickly with a program like Nobi and do that micro learning. And it really has been the number one thing we've seen people asking for. So that's not surprising.
Yeah, this is so exciting to see this just keep going. That is so cool. And we are going to talk about how do we give opportunities for our employees to grow? What does that look like? That's one of the strategies, is giving folks that opportunity. So let's dive into some effective retention strategies.
Okay, Jess, I think you have an example that kind of covers the whole gambit here. Do you want to lead off with your example, and then I'll kind of talk to a little specialized niche that we do?
Yeah, I'll go into that. So employee retention refers to an organization's ability to keep its employees, reducing the turnover. So I want to make sure that we start with that definition just to level set us. So it involves creating a work environment that is supporting employees' needs, making them feel valued, engaged, providing opportunities for growth, and high employee retention rates are beneficial as they keep and help maintain the business efficiency, reducing recruitment costs. We know that that is not a cheap investment, and also improve employee morale and loyalty. So at MC Dean, to reduce turnover, we have multiple ongoing initiatives. I'm involved in both our HR department and our learning and development. We have a lot of cross-department initiatives. And my personal focus has been to meet employees where they are. And I know you'll probably hear me say that a few times throughout this morning. And we want to give them opportunities to grow, feel supported, and then leading to that reduction in turnover. So as I mentioned, and one of MC Dean's values is expertise. We have 3. So expertise, agility, and trust. We know that our employees' careers are more than just, hey, reaching this destination. And we want to give them the ability to have a journey of that lifelong learning, and different experiences throughout that. So we are developing career paths as a mechanism to enhance their skills and their knowledge. We are defining what does it look like to be in this specific position? What do you need to know? What type of job requirements do you have? What certification should you be leaning towards? And with that, how can you move within the company? So with all of that together, we define that, we give them a visual so they can see, okay, if I want to move to this specific position, I need to obtain these 3 certifications. It gives them that structured path to move forward, and it outlines the learning experiences that they need to get there or that they can experience. One great example, and I'll speak a little bit more to this, is our Superintendent's Academy. It is one way that we are bringing folks that are in the field, our construction industry, and giving them the skills that they need to be in a leadership role. So that succession planning is also part of that. We offer opportunities for career fulfillment. And internal mobility, bringing all of that together. So it's not just one initiative. It's going to take a couple initiatives to meet all of these things that we have here on the screen, to have that job satisfaction. So Brian, I know with a different experience of a different organization, can you share your approach?
Absolutely. And I'm going to kind of talk from my consultant hat. Probably over the last 25 plus years, I've consulted with over 200 tech companies and a lot of startups. And this is putting a different twist on it, but just to give you some creative retention strategies that we have to do. Imagine you have investor dollars and you know this company probably has a limited future. So when we talk about job security, you really can't go in and say, look, you're going to retire with this company. The chances are you're not. We're not sure the company's even going to go. We're not sure the product's going to be accepted. And so how do you retain employees? Because you can imagine if you have to develop something, you can't have fall off of an employee group that you've put all this training into right before you're going to be launching because they're thinking, boy, it's going to come to an end. So it's really tough to retain, and we don't have that job security. So one of the things we do on this slide that I'm going to really point out is really that trust between everybody. You have to have that trust, that open communication, that transparency. Now, at the same time, we do a lot of flexible work environment and personal development. And it's interesting when I've been talking to Jess, they have all these wonderful career pathways they're doing. I mean, I listen to the work she's putting in, and it's unbelievable. We have to do a flexible career pathway. As a matter of fact, I kind of alluded to this before. Our flexible career pathway includes not even being at our organization anymore. So we have to look forward, and it's meeting. I think this goes to what Jess was saying. It's meeting them where they're at, what they want out of their whole career, their vocation. And so we're very transparent with that. And if there's skills we can give them that, you know, fall into our organization currently, but we'll also launch them to the next one, you know, depending on how this company is going to go, which startups have a high failure rate. So we do a lot of what Jess is talking about, but it's a little bit more flexible just because we don't have that one key component that we can offer job security. So I would say one of the things we really lean on is that trust between the employer and the employee. So kind of a different perspective I wanted to give. And I think that gives there's a lot of gray in between there. And I've worked in nonprofits, and that's we really focus on that mission. And so I think there's some components there as well. So at this time, Jess, you want to move to the next slide, and we'll ask, here we'd really like to hear kind of some of sharing your thoughts, reflecting on different retention strategies. We've kind of given these two opposites, and I will tell you, MC Dean is like one of the best I've ever seen. I mean, they do everything spot on. And then I've kind of given you this other side when we have investor money that we're just trying to hang on to people through transparency. So we would love to hear kind of your key takeaways, and also anything that you can share on how you how you actually do the retention in your organization, or maybe how you wish retention was done.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I was trying to find my unmute button.
I have a lot of windows. I know I'm scrambling back and forth.
So thank you. Yes. And we'll do this just like we had the first activity. So we're in activity number 7. If you're looking on Nobi, you can just go for that number 7, sharing your thoughts. I'll have the group open, but if you want to come off mute, we can add your comment as well. So let's go to the group and see what we have coming in. Thanks, Brian.
Right.
Yeah. Trust fostered through transparency is key.
Yes.
Creating career paths. Yeah.
I think that's really fascinating. I've never really thought about it, but we do tend to pay more attention to onboarding and getting people set up really well for the first couple of years, and then we kind of leave them alone and just assume that they're really, really happy. It's not necessarily the case, right? So I love that, the 5-year plan versus and beyond. It's good.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm curious that people are putting their ideas up, but like specific challenges that you guys are facing in the area of retention and growth. Like, you kind of got the experts in the room here. It might be, feel free to kind of, share some of these challenges and get some expert advice from these guys while we've got them.
May I ask a question, please?
Please.
I'm currently not, I'm freelancing, so I'm not at a company, but I'm just curious, how would you balance political agendas of employees with your retention strategies? I mean, it's easier to get employees involved if they've got a clear career path going forward, but what about all the political underlying emotions, competing career paths? Maybe how do you balance that? Do you maybe have a good suggestion?
Yeah, Brian, I have some ideas, but I don't want to
I
jump
know you have yours probably documented out in a book, so I was going to let you go and give the correct way, and then I was going to say how we do it on the streets. So please start out.
Yeah, so I would always recommend having that ongoing conversation. We saw on the group board that transparency is key, and building that trust. And part of that is continually checking in with the employee. So as you have that career path, we even say quarterly, have a quarterly conversation of, hey, where do you fit in here? Does this still match your career path? Maybe we need to look at some other opportunities to move a different direction. just gauging how they're feeling with the company, how they're feeling about their work. Do they still enjoy what they're doing? Those are conversations that their direct manager can have with them. And if it's in this structured environment, and you're doing it on an ongoing basis, it really can bring some great feedback. And then it's not 10 years down the road and they're unhappy because they haven't had opportunities. So that would be what I would say of continuing to have that conversation, not just giving them, here's your career path, go on. But hey, here's a career path. Let's talk about it. And let's discuss the opportunities that you have, whether it's to stay in that or to move. And so I'll pass it to Brian to see what else he has to add.
No, that's great advice,
Thank you,
and
Jess.
fairly similar to what I would say. We have continuous conversations. One of the things that I had mentioned before, how I'll ask people when they come to the company, what do you want to do? And they give me, I'm typically the CEO, so they give me a very pat answer, right? Like, I want to do this career pathway and I'm going to be here forever for you. And I really have to break down that barrier and say, that's not realistic. Look, depending on the field and where we're at, you're probably only going to be here 2 to 4 years. Ours has been longer. We've been very fortunate, but I have a very honest conversation. Look, the stats say you're here 4 years. What do you want to do? Because while you're here, we want value from you, but we also want to be value to you over your lifetime and your vocation. And what I tend to find when I come to a company, I have the conversation, and I have it with every employee. I do it from the senior management team all the way down. And it takes a little, but it doesn't. And then what happens is about a year in, we actually have somebody leave the company, and it's because we help them get to their next place. And since we're transparent, saying, oh, Jess really wants to become a reporter, and so we're giving her, these lessons, she's learning this, and they're seeing her do this along with her job. And all of a sudden she leaves and she goes to a newspaper or wherever it is, like, oh my gosh. And they weren't upset. They actually encouraged her. Then we have buy-in, and they really believe that the communication and that trust is cemented. And I think that's where we really gain a lot of that from. But it comes down to just that communication, and it's constant. The other thing you can do is everybody has their career pathway, but sometimes people outside of ourselves see skills we don't think we have. And so they can mention, I noticed you're really good at juggling multiple things at a time. That really fits these kinds of things. And you're not telling them to go into that. You're just saying, wow, I really see this skill set from you. And then they start to go along with that. And then when they're coming back to that next conversation with career pathways, you can explore it a little more and maintain that flexibility. And it's really growing with them instead of us just saying, you're on this path. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. That's great insights. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Yes, thank you. And as Brian was starting to talk about skills, jump back over to the session. I think we're on number 8 now. Right. So now we're going to start talking about how can we promote internal career advancement through upskilling and reskilling. So Brian, I'm going to just give it over to you to discuss how, if we're looking at a company that has limited funds or investor-backed companies, how can you leverage creative upskilling and reskilling strategies?
Yeah, thank you. And honestly, I wish we had this magical formula, but we really do some pretty basic things. And again, it starts with all that transparency and the communication. But we're very fortunate we can really tailor the upskilling and the reskilling opportunities to that individual. We also, in smaller companies, I've taken a lab tech that was a surgical tech, and it happened just kind of like we talked about. I said, wow, you really have a way with people. Honestly, she didn't have a way with our technicians internally. That was an HR issue, but she really connected with external clients when we happened to have her on some calls. And so we shifted her into sales, and she became a phenomenal salesperson for us. But we were able to do it gradually because we literally had her going into the lab doing surgeries and then coming on to sales calls. And so we made a very personalized plan, which you know, maybe other companies a little bit bigger couldn't do, especially if you're jumping between divisions. But we really use a lot of the flexible micro-learning platforms and carve out pathways for them. It's very personalized. We give them a voice, and I think that voice really allows them to engage. So we can broaden their skill set, they feel engaged, and we can really have these shifts that are quite significant to upskill and reskill them. We do a lot of reskilling. There's so many hats in a small company that we're always anxious. If you want to put another hat on, we'll give it to you. That goes to the burnout side that we have to address. So it's kind of a little more haphazard, and that's what I love about MC Dean, is that you have these career pathways that I believe in so much. We kind of do it a little more on the fly, but try to emulate, you know, what you're doing with the best practices. So Jess, maybe you could kind of tell us best practices of how you're actually doing the upskilling and reskilling.
Yeah, of course. And I have a little bit of a story too. So Brian was sharing that personalized plan, which I love that, being able to really personalize it based on the individual. And so in a company as large as ours, we have 5,800 employees. When we're looking at that number, and we have doubled in size since I've been here, about 3 years now, I've seen that rapid growth. And so how do we continue to have that personalized plan would be with our career conversations, that ongoing conversation with the manager and their employee. But from a corporate standpoint of giving them opportunities to grow. So just want to share, a little of an industry stat. So in the construction industry, we have about 34,000 superintendent positions that remain unfilled across the industry. And so our superintendents, or those that wanting to move into that position, they have opportunities to go to other companies. There are positions unfilled. So how do we keep them with MC Dean, and how can we promote within to then fill our own positions that need to be filled? So we have made a great investment in the development and the implementation of the MC Dean Superintendent's Academy. So we created a 4-part program specific to one career path that we know has high turnover to address that one career path. And so this 4-part program has an industry certification. It also has a MC Dean specific human resource leadership training. So we actually developed that on Nobi for our superintendents, with the thought of being, these folks are in the field. They are working over 40 hours easy. And they're on the go constantly. Some of them are traveling from job site to job site. So we wanted to give them training that they could have in their hands, and they could interact with us and with each other. So that's why we use Nobi for that. We also send them to a leadership development program that they are just immersed. They're in Colorado in this beautiful nature center, and they're focused on their leadership development. And then the 4th one, it is the most important to us, is safety training, to keep them safe when they are in the field, keep their people safe. Our ultimate goal is to bring everyone safely home at the end of the workday. So keeping that as one of the 4 tenets of that leadership program for our superintendents. So that is just one example that we are able to provide a program focusing on one area that has high turnover to increase that retention. So we're keeping folks staying with us and promoting from within. So that was one example. And I have a link on Nobi to send you to our page to give you a little more information about that if you wanted to learn more about that program and what that looks like for us. We also have other offerings, such as our tuition reimbursement. If it aligns with their career path, if we see, hey, you want to move into this role, how can we help you get there? Maybe it's a degree, maybe it's a certification, and we help with that that expense and that investment, and that also showing employees that we are committed to them, that they can trust us as well. So those are just some examples. The Superintendent's Academy is near and dear to my heart, so I always love to talk about that one and how it really brings all of that together of promoting from within, having that career path, and the defined training that aligns with it, and the opportunities for conversations along the way. So they have a mentor in that program as well that just brings it all together.
I love it. And we've talked about the Superintendent Academy, and I do think that is kind of the holy grail. And I've told you that, and we're gonna borrow parts from that and take those in. So Jess, when we're moving to the next session, in session 9, is share your thoughts. And we have a question in there of share your approaches and thoughts on balancing upskilling with budget constraints.
Yeah.
And so if you could start to fill that out, but Jess, I'm going to put you on the spot while you're trying to do all this at once, because I had a question previously and when I forgot that I was a panelist, so now I'm going to ask it since I have time now. So you've laid out in the number of pathways is incredible that you have laid out, and absolutely love what you're doing. How do you keep a process? So you're doing all this process. How do you keep it flexible and personal? So when somebody's going through a pathway and they want a slight deviation, how do you handle that? And maybe you could speak to that while we're starting to have the answers come in. So if the rest of you could share your thoughts on how you do the upskilling. And yes, Jess, you have to run Nobi, get to the group board, and answer the question. I understand the position I put you in, but I see you handling it. So thank you.
I don't mind. I'm pulling from my teacher hat. I can multitask. So that is a great question. So I do want to address the career path part. It is a huge investment of time and also financial investment to outline those career paths, but it is so worth it. We have been working on these career paths for years now, developing them and keeping in mind that they are not static, that technology is ever changing. So adding in new certifications or trainings for that. But when we think of the employee who also isn't static, that as you go through your years of experience, maybe you think, oh, wow, I have such an interest in this area. Even from personal experience, I was going the route of an HR business partner and working alongside our executives for HR strategies. But as I thought about, oh, this is interesting. How can I bring my experience as an educator into that? Then we had the discussion around, okay, maybe I'll move into L&D. So just personally, I've experienced it, but maintaining that flexible part is where that transparency comes in, having that conversation. And when you're outlining the career paths, really looking and see what does it take to get from maybe an individual contributor in one path into a management role. What does that shift take? And giving opportunities for folks that maybe don't want to be people managers. That is such a difficult place to be in. It brings a whole nother layer, and they are experts in their field and saying that they matter just as much as our managers. And how can we give them a path to be the top performers and showing their expertise. So giving them paths that maybe take them in different directions and having that outlined of, well, what do you need to get there in that conversation? So it's not just, here's your path, you're going this way, but that transparency, that conversation, and outlining what it takes to move from one role to another. Brian, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think you more than answered my question. I think you set our whole career pathway program. I know you're so passionate about it. That's why I was curious about it.
Thank you.
I will admit on mine, I put Nobi just so I could get into the group board, and my group board's not updating. So the only thing I can see is what's showing on the shared screen. But I did see somebody talk about pairing with mentors, which is a great idea. It's I think this goes back to what we were talking about before. If you pair with a mentor, not only is the individual who's new, getting upskilled and reskilled, but the mentors actually feel like they're contributing quite a bit. We did a lot of refugees into a company, and we actually had people shifting off of third shift to go to first shift so they could train the refugees, which is a tough thing to do with your family life and your sleep schedule. But I think that shows how much people really do want to mentor and be part of the company. And it really is an inexpensive way to do it. So that's a great suggestion. Jess, I'm relying on your screen, so if you could scroll. Let's see.
Yeah, use expertise that you already have in the company, pairing mentors, comparing costs and hiring, training, and time invested in new hires versus the cost of upskilling. I think that's important. Finding an affordable and easy to implement way to upskill your teams is paramount. I would agree with that. And it's also that onboarding is quite expensive, but also recruiting. What does it take to bring somebody on? You're usually going to hire them in at a higher rate than somebody that maybe you are is currently in that role and maybe they leave you. So trying to keep them and then upskill them so they want to stay is important there.
And I see the celebrating success. Oh, other way. I lost
sorry.
it now. I see, that's all right. I see celebrating success and shared goals, give that responsibility. I think that's fantastic. Anybody want to come off mute and say how they actually celebrate successes? I'm always looking for creative ways for that.
Me too.
I will tell you one way we did. We would sell pharmaceutical contracts. So, and they were big contracts. So we didn't sell a lot, but they were hundreds of thousands of dollars every time we sold it. And every time we sold it, everybody knew it was pie day. I love pie. So it's a thing you can do when you're a CEO. You can be a little selfish. So we would go to Baker Square and we'd get pies and we would all go around a table standing there with our forks, just eating pie together. So that was one way we celebrated. Any others? Especially if it's food related. I love food, so.
I'll share one from MCD and with the size of our organization, and I think I share this later, but I'll just jump to it now. We have an intranet page, so an internal page that has appreciation, and we recognize folks for their anniversaries as well. But not only is it just from like our perspective, but we give their colleagues a chance to submit, so they can submit a recognition. Maybe it's on a project, maybe it's a, hey, this person helped me understand this topic, or I was struggling in this area and I was able to lean on this other employee in a different division. So it just gives them a time to recognize one another. There are platforms out there that you can do that with. I think they're called like Kudos is one, Nectar is another. But we built that internally. And it's just been a really cool place to celebrate each other. But I wish we could have pie together. That sounds better.
And I think
Just a heads up, you've got 2 minutes. Just a heads up, guys.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so
as
Brian,
you can
we
tell,
knew this
we
would
could go
happen.
all afternoon.
Having way too much fun.
Too much fun. Yeah, thank you for the time check.
Yeah.
So as we're going, let's see. Brian, I think, do we want to jump to number 10, leadership skills, or just go into our last 2 minutes together?
I was going to do share your thoughts, see if we
Let's
could
do
have
that.
some people share their thoughts.
Yeah.
So this would be session 12.
Okay. Here we have session 12. So whether it's understanding career aspirations that we've talked a lot about, recognizing signs of burnout, adjusting management approaches to work style, what are some ways that we can meet employees where they are? So just sharing, you can come off mute in our last minute together, or sharing in the group board, I'll bring that up.
Yeah, and I would say with the time left, it'd be great if you could come off mute and then other people can talk or can type while you're talking.
I think burnout is a big one. I think that's something that was, people mentioned a lot at the beginning when we were, why people are leaving. But I think it can be challenging to balance as well if you have people that are upskilling, learning, trying to move between departments, wearing multiple hats, because they want, people want to learn, they want to be good at what they're doing, but then if they're trying to be completely successful at everything, and sometimes that burnout really just, they go, I can't do all of it. So I think that's a big one to find a way to balance the upskilling and learning portion, but also the job completion aspects of what they have to do to get done, right? So how do you balance both is a big question.
Yeah, I would agree that that is a big challenge. And I know I've probably sound like a broken record, but having that conversation with the manager to outline what that looks like. So we want to see you grow. So maybe they spend a little more time on that during a season to meet them where they are, is one way to really show the employee that you're investing in them and that you believe in them.
And in the board, there was consider paying part of the training while the employee pays a certain percentage. I do like that commitment and the buy-in, and I think it forces you into a lot more conversation. Again, that transparency and conversation.
Yeah, showing genuine interest in the person, not the role, that can go such a long way. If you're focused on not just, hey, I need this role filled, I need this job done, but if you're saying, hey, I care about you as a human and as a person, I want to meet you where you are.
And I'll just give in the last 10 seconds or so, my CEO advice going off of what Megan was saying. And I've made this mistake so many times, but if you want to build great teams, we so often take the people who get things done and do a good job, and we add more and more and more on them until they get burned out and leave. You are responsible for your whole team. And I'm telling you, as a great leader, you can pull that out of every individual, and everybody has a role. So it goes into exactly what was stated in the board. Care about them as an individual. And when you take that step back and do that, you will be so much more successful, and you will retain employees, and you will care about their growth. It's not just a checkbox, but it's an actual passion you have for that human being to have them grow, and they'll return it in retention. And it's just a win-win-win situation all around. So.
Yeah, Brian, what a great summary. Thank you.
That was a wonderful summary. And maybe if you guys can unshare the board and we can see your beautiful faces, just to wrap things up before we go on a little break. Thank you so much both for your insight, wisdom. That was very well-rounded, and coming from quite different perspectives was super helpful to have you both in the panel together to talk through that. Jess, my final question for you, even though I'm slightly over, is I'd love to know, and maybe the people on the call would love to know specifically how you used maybe the impact that Nobi's had to that equation. Before we kind of go on break, I'd be super curious just if you've got any stats or numbers that you've pulled from the back end that kind of show retention's improved or growth has actually improved, like, oh, this thing works, and maybe kind of the how. I know there's a mean question to give you over time, but
yeah, I can answer that just high level of providing our superintendents and those moving into a superintendent role. The Nobi platform has been a huge success. They are having it on their phone, not just their laptops, because they are in the field, they're on the go, and they love how the content moves quickly. When I think of that audience, they are learning with their hands. They typically have come up through the electrical field and were apprentices. So they are working with their hands all day long. And then we're going to say, hey, we need you to learn these HR topics that really aren't super interesting. So we give them this platform that moves quickly, keeps their attention, gives them an opportunity to hear from one another. They are loving it. I can say that without a doubt, that every time I speak with someone about it, they love that that it meets them where they are. I know I keep saying that, but it does. It's on their phone or it's on their iPad, and they can do it in the field when they have 5 seconds to work on it. But then it's a great piece of resource that they can come back to. It's not a training that is just done and it's out of their hands and they have to just rely on their notes, but they can actually come back and reference it. So that's where I've really loved that. We have grown the program from the first 20 folks last year to now we've tripled that. We're at 60 now. And in the next 3 years, we'll be training over 200 employees. So I'm really excited to see how impactful that the program has been.
Thanks, Jess. So if you have any follow-up questions, because obviously my brain's going a million different ways,
Right.
exactly what strategies does she use to keep the content moving fast, keep them engaged, keep them in that, actually completing. There is an opportunity at the end of today's, not session, but the end of today's at day one and connection points to share LinkedIn tags and things like that. So maybe you can connect with Jess personally, and I'm sure I'm volunteering her to be able to answer any questions that you might have about the specific content curation to actually get those incredible results that she's talking about at a higher level. Thank you both so much for taking the time. Let me just share my screen for a second, team, just so you can kind of orientate yourself as to where we're at. So we've just ended session 3 with an incredible first breakout from Jess and Brian. If you want to just go ahead, you can just see in the very, very last action of their session, just how much did you enjoy the program? I don't want to skew the results, but I'll put it in a 5 just because I'm here. But that just really helps them know how effective the session was, give them any feedback. And you now have a 10-minute break